remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds."
Julius Robert Oppenheimer, often referred to as J. Robert Oppenheimer, was an American theoretical physicist whose groundbreaking work during World War II forever changed the course of human history. His pivotal role in the development of the atomic bomb not only secured victory for the Allied forces, but also opened a new era fraught with moral dilemmas and unprecedented scientific advancements. Beyond his contributions to the Manhattan Project, Oppenheimer's intellectual prowess and leadership left an indelible mark on the scientific community and the world at large. Born on April 22, 1904 in New York City, Oppenheimer grew up in a family that valued education and intellectual pursuits. His father, Julius S. Oppenheimer, was a successful German immigrant who became a wealthy textile importer, while his mother, Ella Friedman, was a painter with a passion for literature. Oppenheimer's early education was marked by a thirst for knowledge, and he displayed a remarkable aptitude for science and mathematics from an early age. He attended the Ethical Culture School in New York City, where his intellectual potential was nurtured. At age 18, he entered Harvard University, where he studied chemistry, physics, and philosophy, immersing himself in the academic environment that would shape his future. After graduating summa cum laude from Harvard in 1925, Oppenheimer pursued his graduate studies in physics at the University of Cambridge in England. Under the mentorship of renowned physicist J.J. Thomson, he thrived in the vibrant scientific community of Cambridge, honing his theoretical skills and developing a deep understanding of quantum mechanics. Returning to the United States, Oppenheimer completed his doctoral studies at the California Institute of Technology, Caltech, where he worked under the guidance of Nobel laureate Linus Pauling. His doctoral thesis on electron-positron pairs, published in 1927, demonstrated his growing reputation as a brilliant young physicist. Throughout the 1930s, Oppenheimer made significant contributions to theoretical physics, particularly in quantum mechanics and astrophysics. He held faculty positions at the University of California, Berkeley, and the California Institute of Technology. Oppenheimer's research on neutron stars and black holes foreshadowed later breakthroughs in astrophysics. As World War II intensified, concerns about Nazi Germany's progress in developing nuclear weapons prompted the United States to launch the Manhattan Project in 1942. This top-secret project aimed to develop an atomic bomb before the Axis powers could do the same. Oppenheimer was appointed the scientific director of the Los Alamos Laboratory, the secret research facility in New Mexico, where the atomic bomb would be designed and constructed. Under his leadership, the laboratory brought together some of the finest scientific minds of the time, including Richard Feynman, Enrico Fermi, and Niels Bohr. Despite the immense pressure and ethical dilemmas surrounding the creation of the atomic bomb, Oppenheimer's dedication and brilliance played a crucial role in its successful development. On July 16, 1945, the first atomic bomb was detonated in the New Mexico desert during the Trinity test, marking the beginning of the atomic age. The Manhattan Project stands as one of the most significant and secretive endeavors of the 20th century. It was a top-secret research and development program undertaken during World War II by the United States, the United Kingdom, and Canada, with the primary goal of harnessing nuclear fission to create atomic bombs. The test not only confirmed the viability of the bomb, but also sent a clear message to the world about the United States' newfound nuclear capability. The Trinity test and the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki are pivotal events that mark the culmination of the Manhattan Project and the beginning of the nuclear age. These events, which took place during World War II, forever changed the course of history, ushering in an era of unprecedented power and moral dilemmas. Let us delve into the significance of the Trinity test and the devastating impact of the atomic bombings on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The Trinity test, conducted on July 16, 1945, in the deserts of New Mexico, was the first ever detonation of an atomic bomb. Codenamed Trinity, this test was a crucial milestone for the Manhattan Project, the top-secret research program aimed at developing atomic weapons during World War II. The bomb used in the Trinity test was an implosion-type plutonium bomb, similar in design to the Fat Man bomb later dropped on Nagasaki. The successful test demonstrated the feasibility of harnessing nuclear fission as a powerful weapon and validated the years of intensive scientific and engineering work undertaken by the project scientists and engineers. Just weeks after the successful Trinity test, on August 6, 1945, the United States dropped the first atomic bomb used in warfare on the city of Hiroshima, Japan. The bomb, codenamed Little Boy, was a uranium-235 gun-type bomb. The devastation was cataclysmic. The blast killed an estimated 70,000 people instantly and obliterated nearly 5 square miles of the city. Many survivors suffered from severe injuries and radiation sickness, and the long-term effects of radiation exposure continued to plague the region for years to come. Following the devastation of Hiroshima, Japan still refused to surrender. On August 9, 1945, the United States dropped the second atomic bomb, Fat Man, on the city of Nagasaki. This bomb was a more powerful implosion-type plutonium bomb. The Nagasaki bombing resulted in the immediate deaths of approximately 40,000 people. The city's industrial and residential areas were reduced to rubble, leaving behind a haunting reminder of the destructive potential of nuclear weapons. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki had a profound impact on Japan. Realizing the devastating power of these weapons, Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's unconditional surrender on August 15, 1945, bringing an end to World War II. The aftermath of the bombings led to considerable debate and ethical discussions worldwide. The devastation and loss of innocent lives raised questions about the morality of using such destructive weapons and ignited efforts to control the proliferation of nuclear weapons. Japan unconditionally surrendered on August 15, 1945, with World War II costing the country an estimated 2.6 to 3.1 million lives and 56 billion USD. Though Japan was left with almost nothing, their economy recovered at an incredible speed. Known as the Japanese economic miracle, Japan experienced rapid and sustained economic growth from 1945 to 1991, the period between post-World War II and the end of the Cold War. As depicted in this chart, the real growth rate was positive until 1973 and increased for 20 consecutive years. In less than 10 years, Japan's economy was growing at a peak rate, last observed in 1939, with the economy growing 2 times faster than the pre-war standard every year past 1955. There are 4 main factors that allowed for this super rapid growth: technological change, accumulation of capital, increased quantity and quality of labor, and increased international trade. Through strategic planning and cooperation by firms, individuals, and the government, Japan manipulated these factors to become the 3rd largest economy in the world. Though it has been 77 years since the end of World War II, many elements of Japan's economic recovery remain relevant to our society and can be applied to countries that have recently emerged from conflict. After the war, Japan had lost more than a quarter of its industrial capacity and was only left with over-depreciated capital stock that had no use. This allowed Japan to adopt an abundance of new technologies without having to wait for assets to be fully depreciated, fueling Japan's voracious appetite to start fresh and innovate. Look at this chart. It depicts the number of contracts signed to import new technology, mainly in industries such as iron, steel, petrochemicals, electronics, motor manufacturing, and chemical engineering, sectors characterized by extremely high growth rates. Furthermore, several government policies favoring these technological changes were implemented. First, the government aggressively used expansionary monetary policy to create cheap money, such that growing industries had access to low-cost funds. Interest rates were rigid and closely monitored to be kept low, and corporate businesses were over-borrowing while banks over-loaned. The government also rewarded growing businesses with generous depreciation provisions and tax deductions. Large, more rapidly growing corporations had lower tax rates than smaller, slower-growing firms. Personal income taxation was also slowed through partial exemption of interest and dividend incomes from taxation. Foreign countries greatly influenced and inspired the creation of new technologies, and Japan began importing tremendous amounts of goods as well. For example, machine tools and robots were imported and became widely used in the automobile industry, while imported generators were adapted to improve the efficiency of the electric utility industry. In 1963, the Japan Information Center for Science and Technology wrote 210,000 abstracts of foreign scientific papers to make foreign ideas and knowledge accessible. The Japanese also took the new technologies they imported and improved it themselves, making the technology an estimated 20% more efficient. 9,500 large firms reported on spending a third of their R&D expenditure and modifying and perfecting the imported technique. In order to import and implement the new technologies mentioned above, the Japanese concentrated their capital into investing in rapidly growing manufacturing industries. In contrast, people in other countries were investing more in housing or other social overhead capital. This difference came from the Japanese's great desire to close the technological gap between Japan and foreign countries and increase their international competitiveness. At the time, the returns of these investments were high because the marginal productivity of capital was so high. In order to balance these large investments and avoid extremely high inflation, there was also a high rate of personal saving. During 1959 and 1970, the ratio of personal savings to disposable income averaged at 18.3% in Japan, while it was only 12% in Germany and 7% in the United States. A key element to the Japanese economic miracle was the keiretsu. Keiretsu were very large business groups that linked banks, trading companies, and industrialists through ownership or stock and long-standing exclusive relationships. Their mere size gave them the financial strength and connections they needed to outperform their domestic and foreign rivals, aggressively gaining market share in high-growth sectors with long-term potential. The government also worked in favor of the keiretsu, implementing policies that would minimize any competition for the firms. The Ministry of International Trade and Industry allowed administrative cartels and collusive activities to take place, with more than 1,500 of them going unprosecuted. For example, mergers amongst the 5 largest firms in a given industry were approved, supporting anti-competitiveness. At the same time, the workplace culture of keiretsu played a large role in its success because it improved the quality of labor. The Japanese business environment was extremely competitive, and all companies went to great lengths to keep up with one another. In order to continuously update product designs and implement new production techniques, employees were expected to work extremely long hours and stay loyal to the firm for a lifetime. They were held to high standards with strict rules, such as how low to bow to various superiors, with training for these roles starting at a young age. In fact, several of the world's most practiced industrial practices, such as total quality control, lean production, and cross-functional product teams, are said to be first implemented in the keiretsu. Finally, Japan's exports grew rapidly after the war, boosting the economy. By providing tax deductions for overseas sales expenditures and preferential loans, the government was able to lower the prices of exports, making them relatively cheaper than other countries. The mergers and anti-competitive behavior they encouraged were also mainly in sectors that exported their products. However, the single most important factor in international trade that allowed Japan to stay ahead of its competitors was its ability to change what they were exporting every couple of years. Between 1950 and 1965, Japan went from primarily exporting textiles and sundry goods to machinery, and finally to metals. Due to increased efficiency and corporations' ability to keep up with changes in the international trading stage, Japan was able to provide goods that were in the most demand, increasing exports and thus real economic growth. Today, most war-stricken countries are developing countries whose economies are primarily based on agriculture. For example, there were 15 countries at war in sub-Saharan Africa in 2019. Specifically, Ethiopia's civil war continues to be one of the most devastating conflicts of 2022. Agriculture in Ethiopia accounts for nearly 46% of GDP and 85% of total employment. Since it is evident that favorable government policies played a crucial role in Japan's economic recovery, comparable policies should be implemented in today's post-conflict countries. For example, governments should shift their revenue source away from personal and business income taxes and to natural resource rights. Since these countries are abundant in natural resources, and because natural resource extraction tends to decline during war, there will be a large demand for commodity goods in post-war economies. Instead of taxing firms operating in the primary sector, the government could tax the sale of the right to extraction, done through an auction that the African Union can oversee in cooperation with the Union African Development Bank and OECD. By making tax cuts in personal and business incomes, citizens and businesses can have some leeway in their post-war recovery. Taxing natural resource rights instead will make it easier for firms in high-growth sectors to make profits, but still ensure revenue for the government. Furthermore, increased international collaboration will be imperative for the economic growth of post-conflict countries. While increased exports and the sharing of knowledge with foreign countries greatly contributed to Japan's success, international agreements can help developing economies of today. Since commodities are subject to significant fluctuations in price, some economists have suggested negotiating international commodity stabilization agreements to protect vulnerable but growing sectors. Also known as price band buffer stock programs, governments would purchase a given quantity of goods at a fixed price, and then sell them for a fixed price such that prices are contained within a band. Though these policies are controversial as they cause inefficiency, research shows that price stabilization for coca, coffee, jute, wool, and wheat is greatly beneficial to its exporting countries. They would generate greater export revenue, as well as create a positive pure welfare impact. Some of the poorest developing countries located in West Africa, Latin America, and Asia would be greatly supported by these policies. While the circumstances of a country emerging from war in 1945 is drastically different from today, concentrating on dominating high and long-term growth industries is a key goal that remains relevant and effective for recovering economies. This will require the cooperation of governments and foreign countries through favorable taxation policies and negotiations that give growing but vulnerable firms an advantage. By identifying a country's comparative advantage and fulfilling that industry's potential, a country may be able to experience rapid recovery and growth to birth their own economic miracle.